qarqaaraniif wanna Dr. Gammachuun baadiyyaadha lammataa ol deebi'ee isaan biratti qaxaramee hojii wanna argataniif wanna ta'eef kabaja guddaan isaanii kenna isinis akka naa kennitan hin barbaadu.
I will dura afaan Oromootiin dubbadheen booddee afaan Ingiliishiitti deebi'a. Kitaaba kana kitaaba rakkisaadha, baay'ee rakkisaadha. Garuu utuu abdiin kutatiin utuma karaa adda addaa nutti duulanii as geenyeera. Innaa kitaabichis ba'eera. Nama tokkoon baay'ee galateeffachuu barbaada. An dhugaa dubbachuudhaaf aadaa Oromoottis seenaa Oromoo keessattis namichi inni calqabaa kan ija nu bane Profeesar Asmaroom Laggasaati. Otoo Profeesar Asmaroom Laggasaa yeroo sana waan silaa yeroos hojjetamu hojjechuu baate wanni nuyi irra ejjennee as geenyu hin jiru ture. Kanaaf iyyuu Profeesar Asmaroom Laggasaa gidduu keenyatti argamuu isaas baay'een gammadaa. Ammoo ijoollee qabdaa, ijoollee horatteettaa, ijoollee Horn of Africa keessatti ijoollee baay'eedha horattee jechuudhaan barbaada. Kanumani afaan Ingiliishiitti deebisa. This book, writing this book hasn't been easy. Writing this book has been the most difficult because of the nature of the subject matter and because of the way we tried to corner it. Actually turning an oral tradition into a written literature in the academic sense acceptable to European standard kind of reading is very, very difficult. Without the magic of my wife, Dr. Anisa Kasam, this would not have been achieved. But more than that, you see, the ladder that your father did not build for you is always difficult to climb. In this sense, Professor Asmaroom Laggasa actually built the first ladder, without which Oromo culture, Oromo history, and Oromo value systems would have been lost. And I would like to acknowledge his effort, and I would like to say this to Professor Asmaroom Laggasa. You've got children and grandchildren in the Horn of Africa, and we do continue to acknowledge what you have done, because if you didn't do that, actually it would have been lost, and it would have been lost for good. And we're proud of you and proud of what you've done for humanity. Thank you. Do you want to say something? No. She's shy.
Ishi hundi keechanu OSA kanarratti argamtanii sagantaa bareedaa kana ummata keenya warra durii qabee hagarraatti qabsoorra turanii kana argachuudha carraa kanaan argachuu keechanii hundi keechanuu baga gammaddan anilleen bagan gammadeen jedha. OSA amata digdamman har'aati OSAdha kan biyya alaa deemee balaa OSAtiin biyya alaa laalee haaluma kanaan biyyattis deebinee investimentii akkanaa kana adeemsisaa kan jirru jechaadha. Waa'ee quuqama Oromoodha har'a oduun ta'in daa'imummaa keenya wanna wal keessa turreef namni kun maal inni isuma bichaatu Oromoodha wanna hunda hojjetaa jedha. Garuu dirqama lammummaadha. Ana dhiisii Profeesar Asmroom matsaafa isaa hundi keenyaa kanuma jala deemnu ture. Isaanuu saba keenya namni hin taane waa'ee saba keenyaati haalan nu ifa ba'aa jira, ibsaa jiran. Nummoo dirqama qabna. Dooktar Gammachuu matsaafa kana yoo tsaafuu dirqama isaati. Oromummaa ibsuu qaba wanna ta'eef. Warra Oromoo taatanii kana hojjettanii galata guddaallee isin galchuu baadhu. Sabni biraa han akka Dooktar fi Profeesar Asmroom namoonni adda addaa kan naannoo adda addaatirraa dhalatanii quuqama saba keenyaa rakkina saba keenyaa ibsanii galata guddaa isin galchuun barbaada. Matsaafa kanas Dooktar Gammachuun yeroo baay'ee itti fixee Dooktar Gammachuun amala isaa hin beektanii nama tuqaa hin jaalanneedha. Alaqaan barbaadu. Kanaaf Dooktar Gammachuun Dambidolloo erga bakka isaanii galan ergan argee booda ofii kiyyaafin kootu wanna biraan hojjetini alaqaa biraatis shoomuun barbaachisu. Qorannoo Oromoo bichaa naa qabadhu too deemi. Of jalatti qaxariitoo hojjisiisi. Kanaafuu jedheetin Dambidolloo irraa fide mana jireenyaa kennee fi ji'aanis damuuza kaffalee fi aadama Oromoo kana bichaadha akka hojjetu. Ummatuma Oromoo kana akka barsiisu. Dooktar Gammachuun gootaraa ganaa keechaa waraabnee kan hin finne sanyii facaasuu dandeenyu baay'eetti isa bira jira jechaadha. Kanaafi har'a matsaafa kana kunoo anilleen chaansii argadheetoo bani erganaan jedhanii baneen jira. Ammas matsaafni kun irra deebi'ee akka maxxansiifamu birrii miliyoona gimmaasha kennaaf jechaadha. Kan biraatis ani gizee baay'ee matsaafa baay'ee dubbisee nama amansiisuu hin jaaladhu. Gizee daa'imummaa kiyyaa. Matsaafa Profeesar Asmroom kana nani qo'adhaa nan laalaa. Keechattuu matsaafa gabaabduu ta'ee waa'ee Oromoo kan ibsu matsaafa namni tokko barreesse hin beeku adi. Gadaa Meelbaa kan jedhu bandiraa Oromoo kan ofirraa qabdu tokko. Isii matsaafa ayyamaa abbaa qabeenyatiin ala ummatatti himuudhaa ati eenyummaa kee kan ittiin ibsitu wannan baay'ee isaan bira tureetoo itti hin barbaanneef matsaafa san bitaatiin hiraa ture. Matsaafni sun dhumnaan mana maattamee galeetiin indagana attamsiise. Ummataa hiraa ture. Namni kun hojiidhaan agarsiisuudha. Kun immoo dubbatee amansiisuudha. Kanaafi baay'ee dubbii isinittis hin baay'isuuf galatoomaan jedhaa. Profeesar Asmroofittis immoo 200,000 haga yeroo kanaas turan akkan kennuufi akka fudhatanii jedha. Kunooti bannee jiru. Profeesar Asmroom achumatti. Annisatti kennu. Kuma dhibbashan. Kanuma galatoomaan jedhaa sagantaan keessa sagantaa gaarii haa ta'u yeroo hundaa OSA wajjin jirraa yeroo hundaa ummata cunqurfame wajjiniin hin jiraa sodaata akka malee hin qarqaarra wanna barbaachisaa ta'u bakka rakkoon jiruttis bira ejjennu nagaa nu ta'a.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Without Obodinku, I would not have seen half of Oromia. He gave us a car to travel to Dambidolo, to where Gamachu is born, and that is when I first saw Dambidolo. Without Obotabor, this book would not have seen the light of day. And I also wanted to say that this money that has been given so generously to us is going to be the seed money for our educational trust, the Fifth World Educational Trust. Because according to the oral traditions, you are not supposed to profit from the words of the elders.
Matsaafi kun gurguramusi, birri matsaafa kanarraa argamusi, educational trustii ijoollee ol guddattu gara fuulduraatti qorannoo aadaadhaa fi seenaa Oromoo irratti geggeessaniif gala malee saantimni tokkooyyuu kiisa kiyya singalu, kiisa aniisaa singalu kan akka beektaniidhaaf.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate Obodingu Dayasa for the service that he has been giving to his Lammi Oromo. He has recognized Professor Asmaron Lagase, who has devoted his lifetime for Oromo, and so far he stays. Obodinku really dedicated about 200,000 Ethiopian birr for his accommodation as he stays in Ethiopia, and of course $500,000 to Dr. Gamachu and his wife, Dr. Anisa, to further publish the extra copies of the material so that everybody would have the access, sufficient copies of the material. Thank you. Obodinku naga na ebisa maka Oromotin. Lubbuu isaanii nuuf buluu nuuf jiraatanii Oromooti kan biraas akkuma kana adaraa wal faana bunu. Qofaa isaanii hin danda'an jechuuf jedheen.
Galatoma amma wanni seeshinii sattaanuun itti fufnaa otoo san dubbatin dura wanti jechuu barbaadu OMN ganamaa kaasee sagantaa kana dabarsaa jira direct live transmission kanaaf OMN baay'ee galateeffachuu barbaannaa. Kanattaan Sudan panelii lammaffaa sanan beeksisaa. Panel second is integrating democratic indigenous institutions into governance. The speakers here will be Dr. Daniel Ayana, Dr. Tsaggaye Tukke, and Obbo Getachew Guddina. I invite the speakers to the podium. The moderator is Dr. Taddasa Bariso. The four of you please come to the podium and then start the presentations. Yeah?
Thank you very much, Professor Bakala. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. And this is the second panel of the day. The title of the panel is Integrating Democratic Indigenous Institutions in Governance. We have three speakers. I don't know where the other speaker is. The speakers are Professor Daniel Ayana, Young's University, State University, and his presentation the title of his presentation is a geocultural unit of local assemblies, anchoring democracy on indigenous cultural institutions in Ethiopia. The second speaker is Dr. Tsaggaye Tuke Kiya from Hawassa University. And the third speaker will be Obo Getachew Gudina Dinagde. I don't need really to introduce, you know, Daniel used to be our colleague at Addis Ababa University, and he went to America for his PhD degree. And I guess America is much warmer than Ethiopia, and he stayed there, you know. He has published a lot of articles and books, a renowned scholar. So, you know, I invite Daniel to just give us his presentation.
The title of my presentation, as you can see here, is a geocultural unit of local assemblies anchoring democracy in indigenous cultural institutions in Ethiopia. Okay. When I say geocultural, I'm referring to the entire Ethiopia, the raised plateau. But when I say Ethiopia, I have to define. There are two categories of Ethiopia. The first one is a category of power and privilege. The second one is Ethiopia, where it means a category of peoples. The first one, the category of power and privilege, is a kind of 20th century project. It mixes up or confuses unity with uniformity. And so I am using Ethiopia, the category of people with powers. The central idea of my presentation is the key denominator for the peoples living in this country is their local level assemblies and the organic intellectuals leading these assemblies for centuries, if not for millennia. And these organic intellectuals have the principle of freedom as their basic guiding philosophy. Here I have to stop and define what I meant by organic intellectuals. There are two types of intellectuals. One, traditional intellectuals. The traditional intellectuals here are basically the ones who would like to subordinate the constituents they are leading under the state. Organic intellectuals, however, always strive to keep the constituents free from the state. So this will be my definition. The second aspect is when I say organic intellectual or intellectuals, I am not limiting it to those educated with BA, MA, or PhD. I include the terminology to encompass local, rural farmers with wisdom, with the idea, creativity, with knowledge about their culture, and the ability to interact with the state and also to resist the state. Before I go further, afaan Oromootiin gabaabsa wantan dubbadhu kanaan maayinni kan hin jedhu naannoo kana kan saboonni jiran hundumtuu naannoo isaaniitti aadaa bilisummaa waan qabaniifi humni achi gadi irratti cunqursaa fiduu hin danda'u. Yeroo hundaa rakkinni keenya hamma ammaatti achi gadi irratti fe'uu wanta barbaadamuu didu saboonni. Kanaaf akka Profeesar Mararaan jedhetti rakkinat, or from crisis to crisis through crisis. Amma immoo qeerroo, qarree, dargaggoonni hundumaa naannoo kana jiran geeddarama kana waan fidanii fi dimokiraasiin waan local assembly kana keessatti founded ta'uu qaba. Wanti haaraan namoonni naannoo isaaniitti wanta kana akka fayyadamanidha. Kanaafi the other aspect of my argument is that the Oromo Gada is not unique, but is a reminding evidence of ancient Cushitic, Semitic, Omotic, and Nilo-Saharan local assemblies. List of local assemblies for the Sidamite Sera, for Gurage Yajoka, Gordana Sera, Kambata Sera, Tigray Baito, Amaraya Abad Institution, Walaita Dullata. So, common feature of Afro-Asiatic population is this principle of freedom and translocal connections. I will start with Oromo Gada system. The Oromo Gada is said to have been invented in the 16th century. No, most probably it goes back to 2nd or 3rd millennium BC. The first written evidence we have is 850-51. Then I move on to the various aspects of this concept. The multiple obligations in northern Ethiopia led to the cause for revolt. The idea of Gobazalaka is basically revolting anytime there is imposition from the top. On the other hand, the idea of Abadullah is an elected person ready to lead the local able-bodied against the imposition from above. So these are the common heritage of the local assemblies. I'm just trying to summarize now so that we might not have time later on. The local assemblies, to help us establish democracy from below, they have principle of freedom, translocal connections. They have public service ethos. One of the problems that we have is that anyone who is appointed as a government official is basically using that position for enrichment of himself and his relatives. The other is periodic elections. These local assemblies have periodic elections. Then there is also principle of equality and representation. There is oratory for consensus building. There is openness and transparency at the local level. In some cases, very interestingly, similar words are used. Sera, or Serit. And so we have these strengths. The other aspect of this is the narrative strengths with unifying themes for a common history. So the heritage of freedom is essentially what leads to resistance to injustices. And so if people have this heritage of freedom, they cannot be suppressed. The idea behind this is, the idea behind my presentation is to provide legal recognition and constitutional provision for local assemblies led by organic intellectuals. That's one. This becomes inclusive and empowers rural inhabitants. The other aspect is that these local assemblies be free from party control. This is essential. Otherwise, we end up in the same place where we have been dancing. The third is that it becomes a forum for accountability and countervailing institutions against party members who abuse their powers. So the key words are essentially translocal, etc., etc. And the last word, people's interpretational tilt. Professor Markakis was earlier talking about historiography, history written from above. But the same history can be read and written from below. That's what I call people's interpretational tilt. There are so many rebellions, not today, not yesterday. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, all of them are due to local injustices. Two ideas: new frontier, ushering lasting change. That informs my talk. Already we are a new frontier brought by Errokare and the other young men. And so we have to move on to a road less traveled so far. What is this road less traveled so far? It is connecting these local level assemblies at the federal level, empowering the local level assemblies so that all people become part of the discussion and policy making. The foundation of Ethiopian state always have been identity politics. It has been a negative identity category for almost many centuries. So for instance, from 1900 to 74, there is positive identity, Amara in the south, negative identity categories, all the others. 1974 to 91, no talk of identity, socialism will solve a problem. That did not work. 1991, constitutionally, identities are positive, but in practice, not yet implemented. So that's what this presentation is about. I'll summarize Oromo history. 1900 to 1960, Oromo is a group in itself, survival. 1963 to 91, Oromo for itself. And 1991 to the present, Oromo with others for democracy. And from this, I move on to the next presentation. Since the Ero played a very important role in inspiring, in sacrifice, the Ero principle is about freedom, equality, and justice. And therefore, the coming transition, the new frontier, the new change should be a democratic process where the local assemblies are incorporated into the federal government. Example, for the Gurage, for Oromo it's Gada, for Gurage it is Yajoka. Then all-inclusive federal multi-party democracy be anchored in these culturally based. That makes it a road less traveled so far with his potential. I will not digress much. I will simply point to facts. Oromo history is now being reconstructed from Arabic sources, Egyptian hieroglyphics, and from Nubian sources. So for the Arabs, the word Jamjam or Damdam is the category or reference to the Oromo. One prolific philosophical writer, Al-Jahiz, used Oromo oratory as a proof for the blacks being equal with whites in 9th century Arab Islamic Empire. It is this group that saw local assemblies or Gada assembly on East Africa and wrote about it. Muhammad Hassan's book takes Ethiopian Oromo history to 1300. We use the local categories or nomenclatures. The word Kush, the word Ethiopia, the word Habasha, the word Kush with C, Zanj. These are windows to the past for Oromo history. Windows to the past, a distant antiquity. The first recorded Oromo group is the Jamjam. The Jamjam are the first African group trading with ancient pharaonic, Old Kingdom pharaonic kings. This is from hieroglyphic sources. For the last 100 years, Egyptologists were baffled by the Jamjam and by the Iram. First, they looked at the Gemgem, and who are these people? Where are they? And then eventually they identified the Gemgem with the Iram. The issue by the time of the New Kingdom is A, their location is not established. They are found in many places. And B, Old Kingdom Egypt, New Kingdom Egypt could not defeat this group. Could not defeat this group. So that has been one of the contentious issues, or one of the research agenda for Egyptologists. The other conclusion is that the Gemgem were the first Africans that traded with ancient Egyptians. So I move far. By the time of the Persian invasion of Egypt, King Darius was claiming that the Punt, the Kush, the Macha, these are my dominions. In fact, he was simply copying Egyptian texts, and he or the Persians did not go further south into. And by the time of the Nubian period, we see the Madille and Rahusi as the Iram group. First point about the Gada. For the Egyptologists, there are three references. The Iram, the Gemgem, they elect their leader. Others say they are kingdom. Others say they are chiefdom. But most likely, with the presence of elective institutions in the Middle Nile Valley, essentially justifies to see the roots of the elective system and the Gada in that area. Iram, in many cases during the Roman period, they were referred to as Ethiopians. The word Greater Ethiopia, which Donald Levin used, was basically used by these scholars in reference to the large territory the Iram or the Oromo occupied there. The other is the word Habasha or Habish. The word Habasha originally meant people of mixed parentage, but that was a wrong terminology. The word meant people of different origin living together. The other was the word Hebisti, that is Egyptian term meaning people who live in the land of the gods. So these two were combined to create the word Habasha. But Habashat or Hebisti refer to the land of gods, which is eastern Sudan, northern parts of Eritrea. So I move further now. A sample of local assemblies. For the Sidama Sera, there is somebody presenting, so I will not repeat that. For Kambata, it is again Sera, a local code of conduct, creative, consultative, compromise-oriented, all-inclusive assemblies, Kokata, and then local leaders, assembly leaders elected through competition, rotation of office. For the Gurage, Yajo Kakicha, Gordana Sera, detailed legislative, judiciary functions, criminal laws, organic intellectuals, oration. One important point here is about what we later refer to Naftanya Gabbar system. Among the Gurage and among the Wajrat, criminals, local criminals who are very much offending and repeat offenders, guests are assigned to eat their cattle, their grain, everything to impoverish them. It is this that became a model for later Solomonic dynasty over northern Ethiopia and then finally extended to the southern part. Among Tigrians, it is a Baito. Baito or local level decision, it has a legal force of contract between the parties. Here we have a very interesting issue. Scholars found out that TPLF created a consensus among Tigrayans by using the Baito. When one looks back, the Baito has been serving Tigrayans to resist against emperors. So this is one of the key findings. So before the TPLF, Baito served as a local level inclusive assembly. Territorial Amhara risk system is equitable with access for gender equity. And so behind these lies the Kero or district. And then this also shows you that local level population have the right and the knowledge, the wisdom to essentially produce equitable land distribution. So the local level assemblies of our geocultural units anticipated John Locke's idea of freedom at least by many centuries. The Dingles, this is an Amhara king who decreed man is free land distributory. Probably this idea was derived from the Amhara Baath institution and the Baito system. However, he was basically killed, and so the idea was never implemented. The above outlined grassroots assemblies are one common denominator for the diverse people inhabiting today's Ethiopia. The Oromo Sikh should not be considered a sui generis or one of a kind, but an evidence for the regional local assemblies, an institution that basically helped the local population to survive top-down rule. Here, chronicles basically disparage populations. Chronicles present kingly palace court perspective. Chronicles present the kingly perspective. The king is sovereign. But now the people are sovereign, and therefore there should be, in democracy, people's interpretational tilt for these chronicles. One of the ideas that I jumped up on is that the missed part of the history about not using the local assemblies. So I'll simply restate what I've said so far. The common heritage of these local assemblies are relevant for building democracy from below. These principles are principles of freedom, translocal connection. That means they have connections to the other assemblies locally. The organic intellectuals elected here are, or they do have, public service ethos, and they are honest. They serve not for personal interest, but for public interest. There are periodic elections. There is principle of equality and representation. There is a consensus building oratory. Nothing is done secretly. Everything is open. So there is openness and transparency. Local level publicity, very important. There is the related vocabularies of these, which basically means that the Afro-Asiatic peoples living in this area have the same assembly government. At the international level, what we find today is that the first states in the world were not authoritarian or totalitarian. Most of them were assembly governments. And for our region, whether one says somebody came from the Middle East or from the Middle Nile Valley, local assemblies are the dominant features. And therefore, I basically argue that the local assemblies be part of the Constitution, the federal Constitution, to be given recognition, and that the organic intellectuals leading these assemblies should be free from party control. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Daniel, for finishing your presentation on time. Basically, what Professor Daniel presented is about how indigenous cultural institutions or local assemblies are important in building democratic governance in Ethiopia. It's very, very important presentation. I can't see the second presenter, Dr. Tsagaye Tuke. Are you around? Okay, so I will move to the third presenter, Obogetacho Gudina Dinagde. His presentation is on Council of Constitutional Inquiry, an indigenous unwritten constitution, examining the Gada governance system in light of modern democratic constitutional principles. So I will call on Obbo Getachew.
Thank you very much. Let me introduce myself. I'm Getachew Gudina. I'm constitutional researcher at Council of Constitutional Inquiry. My title is an indigenous unwritten constitution, examining governance system in light of modern democratic constitutional principles. This is a part of my LLM thesis. The data was collected during Bali ceremony in Borana, 2017. So, let me start from the simple word, what is constitution? Constitution is a document in which the aspiration of the people is expressed. It is a consensus document which enables the citizens to choose their leaders, establishes the government, and identifies and delimits the power of the government. In principle, a constitution should reflect the history, culture, and the value of the people it is meant to serve. Especially in federal form of government, a state constitution should reflect the values, cultures, and the traditional governance system of its peoples. It should not necessarily be uniform to national or other sub-unit constitution, because the federal constitution is a complete framework document in that it feels it does not prescribe all constitutional processes and arrangements, but it leaves space to be filled by the constitution of sub-national units. As we know, the past Ethiopian constitution have failed to accommodate values, cultures of Ethiopian multicultural society, including the Oromo Gada governance system. I said Oromo constitution. So the Gada is a democratic governance system formulated by Oromo people before many centuries and being operational in certain parts of Oromia, especially in Borona where data is collected. The Ethiopian constitutional scholars did not give attention to the Gada governance system in their studies. Now, the federal government is neither incorporated in Ethiopian constitutional history nor recently in Oromian national regional state. So the paper is the paper tries to analyze Gada governance, indigenous governance systems, principles, values, and elements in light of modern democratic constitutional principles. It is also intended to indicate the importance of incorporating the system into the constitution of Oromia National Regional State. Finally, seeks to fill the existing research gaps and recommended for better accommodation. We have different types of constitution, written, unwritten, flexible, or rigid, or evolving constitution enacted, nominal or constitution which are not in practice but on paper, or normative constitution. For our purpose, let us see what written constitutions and unwritten constitution. A written constitution is a constitution which is duly passed and enacted in the form of a specific document combined in a systematic and a formal manner. It is a planned constitution formulated and adopted by deliberate action of a constituent assembly or a convention. But a written constitution is a constitution which is neither drafted nor enacted by a constituent assembly and nor even written in the form of a document. It is a result of slow and gradual processes of evolution. Its rules and principles draw binding force from the fact that they're being recognized as ancient, historical, time-tested and respected customs and conventions. It is enforceable and people are followed, supported by public opinion, the product of historical evolution and of political needs, and the practical wisdom of the people. The people know their constitution, obey it, and accept it, but do not possess it in a written form. Whether written or unwritten, modern constitution should accommodate some values and the principles. These principles and values are developed through time and accepted by academic and political discourses. This will serve as a springboard to make comparative analysis between modern democratic constitutional principles on the one hand and the Gada governance system or Oromo constitution. So let us see some points on modern democratic constitution accommodates. Fair, free, and periodic election is one character of modern democratic constitutional principle. Principle of secularism, separation of state and religion, participation in political processes, either directly or through representative, equality and non-discrimination, popular sovereignty, constitutional supremacy, where jurisdiction of written constitution, their constitution is supreme law of the land, protection of fundamental human rights, separation of power between legislative, executive, and judicial power, check and balances, could be mentioned as a cornerstone of modern democratic constitutional principles. So we examine whether these modern democratic constitutional principles are accommodated in Gada governance systems. In Gada governance systems, popular sovereignty, or no, principle of secularism or separation of state and religion is secured. The system separated state laws from religion. In Gada system, laws are the results of human deliberation. These laws are enacted, amended or repealed by the authorized body known as Gumi in Borana or Chafe in another place, that is National Assembly. Actors are different. Actors for governance and the political activities are Abagadas and other elected leaders. Natural laws are supernatural, immutable and beyond discussions. Religious leaders are also different. They are called Kalus. The institution formed by is not by election. Their mandate is limited to spiritual activities or blessing during ceremonies. So the system secured the principle of secularism. Another principle is the rule of law. In Gada system, all peoples, including Gada leaders, are subject to laws. The leaders practices according to rules and regulation. If leaders violate people's value, cultures, and regulation, which is unwritten, their punishment will be serious. Another core principle is the principle of popular sovereignty. People are the ultimate sources of the government. The leaders are elected representatives of the people. They participate in decision directly through the representative in the Gumi Gayo and the clan assemblies. Leaders' powers and duties are limited by laws. Leaders cannot impose their decision on wishes on their wishes on the group. Democratic participation is also all social, political and economic activities of the people from top Gumigayo to the bottom lineage level are decided through the democratic participation. There is no imposed democracy. Another principle is accountability. Highest or Gada officials appear before the highest legislative organ, Gumi, and the people. They judged how well they have conducted their duties and the responsibilities. That is check and the balance also. There is no leader who is above the law. If highest leadership was inadequate, the Gumi will remove them from office or penalize them. Another important principle in the Gada governance system is the principle of free, fair, and democratic election. Each Lubas in its generation setting is lead its cluster for 8 years. In a given Lua, a boy born at the first Gada stage is elected when he entered into Kusa. Democratically, placed then the time for beginning and the ending of the term office is known to the public. So in Borona history, there was one case when the power transfer ceremony was delayed during the Italian invasion in 1935. There was political disorder, and the person who was a Baghdad who would take over the power was died in Italian war. So the time was extended for about 3 years. Then the Borona people discussed upon the decide the next Gada term to limit to 5 years instead of 8 years, to save the disturbance of arranged Gada terms, because there are arranged settings, there are the Balles, Gammes, Kusas, and Rabas, which are arranged in their Gada terms. So the Borona decided the next Gada term to limit to 5 years. So the periodic election itself is permanent, and the general arrangement dictated the people to follow the date and the time of power transfer in the Gada system. Another important point is there are some groups which need special attention in modern democratic constitutions. These may be women, children, and minorities. Minorities which live in Oromo, in Oromo or in Gada system, a group numerically inferior and lives in Oromo have two alternatives: living with its own identity without adopting Oromo culture and the governance system, adopting Oromo culture and living equal fitness with Oromo through Mogasa and the Guddifacha. Connecting to this, women's right is also granted. One of the institutions in the Gada system is Nasinke. In this institution, women is organized and protect themselves from criminal violence together. There is special respect for women. So the wives of Abagada are respected as first lady of formal governance system. So the ceremony, there is no ceremony undertaken without women. Another principle is limitation of office to single term. Time arrangement is strictly prohibited. Holding power for extra time or more than one term is impossible. It may bring conflicts among the society, and the result is the penalty by the General Assembly on that class who holds the power over the scheduled time. After completion of their term office, they must leave the military and the government function to the incoming group. Separation of power is also traditional principles with institutions are National Assembly, Gumi, which plays a legislative role. The Gada Council plays executive, and the Elders Council plays a dispute settlement role. So the Gada governance system, Oromo Constitution, is an expression of aspiration of the Oromo people. It enables the citizens to choose their leaders, establishes the government, identifies and limits the power of the government. It is a revelation of the history, culture, and the values of the people it is meant to serve the Oromo people. It embedded democratic principles, values, element is internalized in the people for a long period of time. This principle is used for the Gada system as equivalent to modern democratic constitution for the institution and the individual to regulate political, economic, and religious activities. The Gada system or Oromo constitution is not arranged in a written form, although it is registered at UNESCO as a World Intangible Heritage in 2016. There is no any law at federal nor at Oromia National Regional State which incorporates the Gada governance, democratic principles, values, and elements. So I recommend the following points. The Oromia National Regional State should accommodate and acknowledge the Gada governance system in its state constitution. The Gada values and the principles are written and transferred through oral way. So it should be written and well structured by Oromia Culture and Tourism Bureau and accessible for research and studies. This helps the scholars and the others to have a further knowledge and research. It also helps for other parties of Oromia where the Gada principles and the values are exercised to protect Gada values and the principles. There should be laws which acknowledge the system, and at the same time, there should be a seat reserved for Gada councils in Chafe Oromia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Obo Getachew. Obo Getachew's paper is basically about how Gada governance system could be integrated into modern democratic constitutional principles. It's also another very important paper which will need further research. From these presentations, you know, when Professor Daniel was mentioning about Jem, I was so amazed, you know. Jem is another name of Guji Oromo. Guji Oromo, who lives in southern part of Ethiopia. I just wondered, you know, how this name is related to the current Guji Oromo society. I'm just, you know, is there like any connection, Dr. Daniel, if you can tell us a few things? Saying that, I will open forum for questions, comments, and accept few questions or comments, you know. So from this side, I don't see hands. Where is that? Oh, okay. Professor Marco Bassi, one. Or here, two. Maybe one other hand. Okay. Let us start with Professor Marco. Floor is yours, Professor Marco.
Okay, thank you to the speakers for this interesting, broad presentation. And I have to say that I'm very glad that the debate is taking also this shape. It is something I've been reflecting over time, because many of the elements that were brought to attention, so the fact that these assemblies help to keep egalitarian relation in the societies, the fact that is a fully functioning governance system, at least in Borana, it was at least at the time I did my research, and that I could not figure out why not to incorporate into modern governance. In reality, it is already incorporated, in the sense that the Borana have always established a kind of mutual agreement with the formal government about sector of society which are regulated by the GADA, and sector or were regulated at the time I was doing the research, and sector of society which were under the responsibility of the government. So in that sense, I would bring a question which is a bit challenging, in the sense that perhaps there is one theory that has become not much fashionable anymore, which is theory of modernity, which says that society change from being producing only one element, one type, pastoralism, farming, but with the modernity becomes much more complex. There are industrial relations, there are international relations, there are a number of other elements that require transformation, deep transformation, including bureaucracy, and the type of bureaucracy Weber was talking about. So the thing is, don't you think it would be good to elaborate more on the fact if a customary institution, a customary way to deal, which is still alive under certain conditions, if this customary way should be incorporated into governance with a more sophisticated and careful analysis. This is basic. I say that because, why the Borana were somehow be able to keep GADA, simply because they kept it separate from statehood, from state administration. They made an effort to keep it separate. And by that way it survived, because it's quite complicated. So this is the question.
Okay, thank you, Professor Marco. Okay. Other question from this side, and Professor Iskel. Okay, first.
Well, it's good. We have heard many times the positive part of the GADA, which I do believe also. It is very important also to be critical in some aspects. So my question on Obogetacho, do you see any failure in GADA? If that is the case, can you mention a little bit, elaborate? I know that it needs further discussion and research.
Thank you. Okay, Professor Iskel.
Given that the title of the panel is about integrating indigenous systems into governance, my question for Daniel is that I understand that you're talking about local assemblies being ancient forms of governance for the Afro-Asiatic peoples, but I want you to comment more on your concept of organic intellectuals, because what we're going to be interested in is in integrating indigenous systems into modern governance. Their role needs to be fleshed out. The way I understand organic intellectuals, they're opposed to traditional intellectuals if you're using it in the Gramscian sense. The traditional intellectuals, usually co-opted by the ruling class, they develop organically, organically with the ruling class, and they function in the interest of the ruling class. They legitimize the ruling class. They create hegemony, that is to say something between domination and consent. So the traditional intellectuals like us, the professors and the civil servants, could be co-opted and legitimize the ruling class. The organic intellectuals, they develop organically along with the dominated class, and they actually create the counter-hegemony that the state actually creates. So what would be the role of organic intellectuals, the way that you presented it in this local assemblies that might be modernized and incorporated to the to governance today? And for the second presenter, I share the concern that Marco just raised about being careful in incorporating this values and principles. And the very first question that you raised about secularism, given that the Kallus are not quite separate from the Abagadas, where is that concept of secularism came that actually separates politics from religion? The Kallus are in some ways not involved in the daily activities of governance, but they are not totally separate in the sense that American liberalism or European liberalism actually separates them. So shouldn't we be careful about simply importing mechanistically into incorporating them into a modern system?
Thank you, Professor Iskel. Before bringing the microphone, he said the second question was not clear. Would you please paraphrase it? The second, yeah.
It's more in line with Professor Iskel. In Africa, there is no clear distinction or dichotomy between religion, politics, and culture.
Good.
All are connected, and they work together. So, is it really secular?
Okay.
We know the role of the Kallu as advisor.
Okay, it's clear now. Okay, now back to the podium. Bring the microphone over here. Okay, first Professor Daniel.
Okay, to start with the moderator's question, what is the relation between Jemjem and Guji? There is a relation between Jemjem and Guji in that the current Guji area has been named as Jemjem at least since 2nd century AD, the Ptolemy's map. B, the current Guji population are partly descendants of the Jemjem, but not all of them. There are other Jemjem groups found in, for instance, in eastern part of Oromia. And so Guji most likely is partly descendant of Jemjem and probably one of the major branches of the Jemjem. And one of the most important contributions of previous scholars is about Jemjem vis-a-vis Vorona. Some say that Guji was basically derived from Vorona, but no, the Guji are actually most likely the ancient, and the rise of the Boron is related to the 16th century population movement, which every 360 years somehow manifests itself. With regards to modernity and change, modernity is not about the erasure of cultures. Modernity is about adopting living cultures to new situations. With regard to the role of organic intellectuals, Professor Iskel raised, yes, organic intellectuals can be co-opted. But as soon as they are co-opted, they are no longer organic intellectuals, but the process brings new organic intellectuals that basically remove those that have become traditional intellectuals. For instance, the Kallu were subordinated or appointed by Menelik to be part of the Gada system. There was a huge debate about the functional redundancy. Professor Asmarom and Donald Levin. What we know is that finally the Borana removed, after 2 sessions of argument, the Borana removed the Kallu from Gada leadership. And so this is where you see organic intellectuals being active and then reassert themselves to free from subordination, to free their constituents from subordination. One question which is raised, which does not actually refer to me, is about secularism in Africa, that in Africa religion and secularism is mixed together. I do not know about most of the African literature, but I have read enough about the Oromo Gada system. One of the uniqueness of Oromo Gada system is that it bypasses religion institutionally. Law is decreed free from religion. When religion comes in, it is basically to sermonize the system. For instance, if there is somebody who has served hugely his country, there will be a solemn ceremony to remember that guy. So if there is ever at the beginning, blessing at the beginning of lawmaking ceremony, it was to make that lawmaking ceremony a sermon to be remembered. So there is a distinction here between the Oromo Gada system and the way law is made among the Oromo.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay, thank you. Regarding the need for carefully the customary laws into incorporate in the modern administration is what I shared is sometimes the formal government also wants to optimize the indigenous governance system, and the other time the indigenous governance systems may violate some or contrary to some fundamental rights. So to need this further research. I agree with this point. So to need this detail and further research. As we know in Ethiopia, especially law scholars argue that the modern Ethiopian constitution is started with 1931 Haile Selassie first constitution. If we conclude that Gada is a written constitution, it may be fallacious because 1931 constitution is not the first modern democrats constitution, not modern constitution of Ethiopia. The other one is about secularism, what secularism, Kalu and Gada officials. Naturally, Gada officials and Kalu institutions are very different things with different capacities. During centralization, Menelik II authorizes the respected person in Borana, especially Kalus, given some authorities such as Dejazmash and some powers. So during this time, the religious authorities interfere into the political powers. Now, as I interviewed during my research, it is already delimited between Kalu institution and the Gada leaders. So it is not the nature of the system. It is sometimes disturbed by interference of some party. So I say thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, the speakers. For the sake of time, I have to close this panel here, but I'm asked to thank, the media who are working here, especially the OMN, OBN, and OBS. So would you please help me in praising them? Thank you very much.
Okay, before we go for a tea break, we will have one keynote speaker. I would like to call upon Ade Ayantu to come here and introduce the guest speaker, please.
I would like to begin by thanking the Kare and Kero and their peers in the other nations of Ethiopia for making it possible for all of us to be here today. As many of you know, Ethiopia's federal arrangement has been under intense attack, even more so than ever before. Most notably, this attack has come in the form of a troubling article published by the esteemed Professor Dr. Mahmoud Mamdani in the New York Times in January of this year. When Mamdani put his international stature behind and joined Ethiopia's right in calling for the dismantling of Ethiopia's federal arrangement, many of us were obviously concerned. Shortly after, a few of us affiliated with the Oromo Advocacy Alliance came together and began working on a response because we had a different perspective we wanted to share. We were concerned that Mamdani was contributing to what has become a very unhelpful discussion about Ethiopia's federalism. It is while in the process of writing this rebuttal that we encountered the work of Obo Kalundi Serumaga, which was timely and incisive in responding to Mamdani. Obo Kalundi's article called into question both the epistemological and empirical basis of Mamdani's assumptions about this thing we call ethnicity and ethnic politics. The article was everything we had wanted to say, hence why we never actually published our piece. Obo Kalundi had said it all for us. Most importantly, technology problems. Most importantly, he had placed the Oromo question within its most proper context, as a question of an indigenous people wrestling against a repressive settler colonial state hell-bent on undermining the values, cultures, identities, and very existence of indigenous peoples in this country. Oromoni namni ofin argujada. And I think that this proverb really captures why it is important that we hear from Obo Kalundi today. We Oromos, and I think many of the oppressed nations in this country, have been isolated for a really long time. And a result or a consequence of that isolation is that we think that we are the only ones facing our particular problem. We think that we are truly alone. However, as you will see from Kalundi's talk, this is far from reality. In fact, the problems facing the Oromo and many groups in Ethiopia are central to the problems facing many people in many African, if not all, African countries today. And this problem is the struggle between indigenous African institutions and the European states left behind after the official end of colonialism. It is to this issue that both Professor Markakis and Boni have been speaking today. It is my hope that Obo Kalundi's remark give us an opportunity to briefly step outside the Oromo and Ethiopian reality and hear about the Baganda people and their struggle to obtain a Babi Yuma within Uganda and govern themselves according to their indigenous institution. I won't go into a long biography in the interest of time, but just to say a few lines. Obo Kalundi Serumaga is a public intellectual and lifelong activist whose writings touch upon themes such as meaning of development, philosophy, indigenous African self-governance, and filmmaking. He is a journalist whose writings can be found on the New Africa magazine and web publications such as The Elephant. He is also the Senior Research Fellow at the Marcus Garvey Pan-African Institute. He currently serves as an advisor to the Kabaka, the political and spiritual center of Baganda life, and is a member of the native parliament of the Buganda Kingdom. Please help me in welcoming Obo Kalundi Serumaga.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for welcoming me here. I'd like to thank Abe Ayantu for that very wonderful and challenging introduction and description, because now I have to try and meet that standard. The only part I really agreed with was my name. The rest I'm not so sure. However, I have to first of all state that I'm extremely honored to be here. I have been listening to and engaging with issues from the Greater Horn region for a very long time. Being here very quickly reminds me of a story of, I don't know if you have heard it, on a very hot day when a man he was walking past a lake and he decided to swim in it. So he removed all his clothes and jumped in the lake and started swimming to the center to cool off. And a second man came who was not okay in the head. These people who walk a bit naked on the streets and picking up things. So he sees these new clothes and he decides to pick them up and wear them. So the owner of the clothes is in the water. He sees somebody putting on his clothes and he starts swimming back to catch him. By the time he reaches the shore, he's completely wet, out of breath. He's now covered in sand, and the other man is running away. So he chases after him. So the other man runs towards a crowd of people. And as he's arriving at the crowd of people, he's catching up with this man who has his clothes. This one starts screaming, "Hey, hey," as if they're going to catch him. So the crowd turns, and what do they see? They see a naked, wet man covered in sand chasing a properly dressed man. So they assume that it is the naked man who has the problem. Okay? And they arrest him. Yeah, the fellow. You tell your report. You see? Professor Mamdani's article. Because every single word organization I have come across and dignify about this, but the darkness we want to is a territory to belong to us. So now and of kings, maybe 8 just yet. Elaborate justice system, throne of the king of in that language. Then it appeared when they were, which is normal, and the thing that which clan is your clan totem. That is simply the symbol of your clan, house you come from, and which great-grandfather's house you come from, and therefore which branch of the clan that is, and therefore which, we call it a hearthstone, a siga, which fire, and then beyond the fire you have the head of the clan. And you must belong to a clan to be able to claim to be a Muganda. The clans are governed differently. The head of any clan is called Omutaka, from the word in our language, etaka, because one of our concepts is that the thing that is absolutely central to the idea of our existence is our land. And each clan had its ancestral lands with its own sacred. His first title, he is called Sabataka, which means he's the head of all the clan heads. And you cannot be the Kabaka if you are not first installed as the head of all the clan heads. I think that explains that. Of course, each clan has a branch within which the native spiritual practices, our religions, are practiced. And this is a hereditary function. It is normally passed down through the line of women who continue to pass on this spiritual power to the next generation and the next generation. I don't know why it's doing this. I'm trying to go as fast as I can. Yes, you're right, I need help. No, I don't, actually. Yeah, thank you. This is the traditional districts of our clan. There were 18 in number originally. They are called Amasaza. I should explain, Amasaza comes from the word Okusala, which is to cut. You see, our traditional districts are built around our justice system, because we have a justice system that starts at the bottom with something called Ebitaurizi, which means a space where you talk, and then it goes up to something called a Gombolola, because a Gombolola, or Kugomba in my language, is when you put your claws, like if a bird puts its claws in an animal. You see, so the issues that have not been resolved at the lower level, that are still holding themselves like claws, are taken to the next level called the Gombolola. Because Gombolola is the opposite of Kugomba. It is to take the claws out. Then above that you have the Saza level, which is there. So the courts at this level simply decide. They say, now we are going to cut, we are going to decide on this issue one way or the other. Then there's a court above that which is in the palace of the king, which is called Chisekwa, from the verb kuseka, to laugh. Because you can even historically report bad practices of the government and the king there, or the king could take someone to court. At the Kabaka can take place independent of the office itself. So now these were the districts that were there historically up until 1966. The ones in color, the ones on the side are neighboring kingdoms and territories. Now, this is what the palaces of the Kabakas used to look like. This is one of, they were not supposed to continue existing. When the Kabaka dies, it becomes, the people who were the prime ministers, the Kabaka's prime minister's descendants have to stay there. Chosen daughters from who were his wives have to stay there. Descendants of his servants have to stay there. That actually is the one where the first European explorer met the side is what he drew, what he